Christmas can be a wonderful time of the year, a time to come together with family and celebrate, a time of fun, love, and happiness. But it can also be a waking nightmare, a horrible, chaotic, stressful, boiling pot, a whole group of people who have nothing in common except for the fact that they are family. And now, on one day in the year, they all have to come together and spend an entire day socializing and eating food together, and you're just waiting with a tick, 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 tick timer ticking down for it to potentially explode. Christmas is kind of weird. Depending on your circumstances in life, it can either be really great or really not so great. And sometimes, maybe due to the magic of Christmas, it can be both? Hey guys, I'm Jax, and this is my spoiler review for The Bear Season 2, Episode 6. I'm also probably going to do brief spoilers about most of the season, but I'm really going to focus on Episode 6 and a little bit of Episodes 7 and 10, because I think those three episodes are the best episodes of the season, but I really just want to talk about this episode, because it is a truly magical, special episode. I am kind of floored by it. It's one of the best episodes of TV I've ever seen. It's easily the best, most kind of realistic Christmas episode. I'm a big fan of Doctor Who Christmas episodes, but they always kind of center on the kind of whimsical, joyous side of Christmas. Yet that's not what Christmas is for everybody, like in the real world. Christmas can often be really painful and really heartbreaking and melancholy and sad and lonely, even if you are surrounded by family. And the way that the bear in this episode represents the good and the really bad of Christmas and family, it's spectacular. It's one of the most heartbreaking and devastating episodes of TV. It is so cleverly utilizing all the things that the bear does so well. The bear, to me, if I was to sum it up in two things, would be family and chaotic kitchen stressful times. And the way it takes us from the kitchen, where we've been used to seeing the bear deal with stress and anxiety, yet all the family bonds, and taking that from the kitchen, you know, the restaurant kitchen, to the family home kitchen as the mum, who we haven't seen before, the mum prepares Christmas dinner. I just thought it was such a genius way to take everything that the bear does and put it in this unique, different setting. If you're new to the channel and you love talking TV and movies and just all things pop culture, give me a subscribe, would very much appreciate it. And everyone, like, comment, I would love to know what everyone thought about this episode of The Bear and the season in general. Was this your favorite episode of the season? I kind of think episode 7 I might like maybe even more, but it feels like a perfect contrast, because this episode is kind of so harrowingly sad and tragic at times. And the one thing about the bear that it does, outside of being really stressful and anxious and anxiety inducing, is that it can be very, very inspirational about kind of reaching for your dreams and striving for your dreams and never giving up. And episode 7, with its kind of beginning of Richie's transformation, cousin Richie goes through the best kind of character arc this season, and it really takes center stage in episode 7, his episode. And I found that to be one of the most inspiring episodes I've seen in so very long. Just about following your dreams, believing in yourself. So I found that really, really good. But I think it works so well because of how kind of intense and emotionally kind of stressful this episode was just before it. The Bear truly is one of the best shows on TV. I feel like everything I have to say about season 1, season 2 is encapsulated in this episode. It is a stressful, chaotic, anxiety-inducing show that at the same time as doing all these really stressful, where you like almost can't keep, like you're almost like losing your breath and you like can't breathe as you're watching it, just wanting it to calm and take a break. And then suddenly it'll just like be very quiet and reflective. Like this episode does all of that, but then we still get a scene with Richie where he goes up with his wife and just has this really beautiful, quiet moment with her as they go and sit down in another room. So it's able to do so much, and yet it can have these little moments of quiet reflection. We get so much backstory on our main characters, even though they kind of don't take center stage, and we just kind of see where they were 5 years ago, and it reflects and shows exactly why they are where they are and why they're acting in certain ways now in the present day timeline. I find this show to be so profound and inspirational, yet simultaneously devastatingly heartbreaking, and the way it combines all these elements into this episode I found to be flawless. Not only is this episode a Christmas episode, not only is it a Christmas flashback episode, but it is a Christmas flashback episode that is double the length of a usual The Bear episode, which makes it essentially feel like a movie. I love that they let this episode have time to breathe, and the way it is perfectly in the middle of this season is so brilliantly placed in terms of we're building to a boiling point. Then it kind of all explodes at the end of episode 5. Then this episode takes us back, gives us all this interesting backstory. And then as the back half of the season kind of slowly builds back up to a climax, the characters we are introduced in the family in this episode slowly kind of appear in the back half. And this episode does so very much in terms of us understanding things that have been hinted at. It feels like almost like documentary in a way, because it is essentially playing in real time, where we're just kind of following people and it just kind of builds and builds and builds. And there are so many moments where people are talking over each other in this chaotic, frantic way that feels so realistic. Yes, it is a show, so it's always heightened to a certain extent, but this show has always felt very real and very kind of true to life. And this episode in that chaos feels very true to life. It's not like an episode where it's just like it's all bad the whole time and it's just stressful and anxious and awful. There are like so many different things this episode does. Like we have little one-on-one conversations, 2 and 3 conversations, group conversations, people are alone, and the way it just kind of bounces between all of these feels chaotic, but still kind of like paced in a way where you don't get completely lost. I can see some people feeling overwhelmed. I felt overwhelmed. I think it's meant to feel overwhelming. And the structure of the episode is very much like a show. We slowly build and build and build, and then there's a third act kind of explosion where everything comes out and it reaches a boiling point. But at the same time, it is just a bunch of people spending Christmas together. There are random conversations thrown in. And yes, there are very important conversations to the plot and to the arcs of these characters, like with Mikey and Carmy, where they go and have a little private conversation. Richie's conversation with his wife up in the bedroom alone, very important to character. But then sometimes we just have random scenes, like the one where John Mulaney is like, I'll give these two brothers $500 just to see what kind of crazy stuff happens out of this. And it's a little condescending, but it's also coming from a place of love. And John Mulaney's just some guy in this episode. Like, he's just there because people are just there at Christmas, and we don't really get like a proper clarification. Maybe I missed it because it's so fast-paced and frantic, of like exactly how he fits in and how they all know each other, but it feels like family or extended family, where they're all very familiar with each other, and some less so than others, and some have tensions from the past that aren't fully explicitly explained, but you pick up a lot from context clues. Like when something kind of erupts in the third act, you're like, I understand how this is built in, even though we haven't had 10 episodes of these two characters interacting to lead up to this moment. So just before I go on about just all my favorite things, but particularly the big third act, which I think is one of the most amazing ends to an episode, and it's just so cleverly written, I want to just quickly talk about the fact that season 2 of The Bear has maybe the most famous people cameos ever. I don't even know if you can call them cameos though, because they're essentially main characters, or at least major side characters that appear. And it doesn't feel the way that cameos can kind of feel. I feel like in Hollywood, and especially superhero movies, cameos have become like this big thing where someone just rocks up and goes, I'm here, haha, look, you like this actor, don't you? But this, it almost feels like that, but it's just kind of delightful and wonderful that they're able to get such huge, spectacular actors for these characters that maybe have 5 to 15 minutes of screen time for the whole season. Will Potter and Olivia Colman rock up for like 5 minutes each in random different episodes. And in this episode though, I almost felt like I was watching like the serious version of an SNL sketch. Like there's a moment where everyone just comes into the house and the door opens and every single character that walks in is like the most famous person in the world. We've got John Mulaney and Sarah Paulson together as a couple. Both of them are so utterly delightful in everything. Love them both so much. And they have like enough to do, but you could have just got anybody. But to get them, they bring such gravitas and emotional weight to these characters that could be forgettable, but are so memorable. We get Mikey coming back, which is a real highlight of the episode, and the way he's treated so very differently than the ways we've seen him in the past, because essentially the backbone of The Bear as a show is the kind of lack of Mikey in all our characters' lives. He died, and he's like the inciting incident, essentially. So the lack of him, and only seeing him in one brief flashback, brilliantly played by Joe Bernthal, he was always kind of treated with such reverence and love, the way you do when someone has gone from your life. You're not going to necessarily always remember the bad times. And this episode, we see such a different Mikey. And like, we've heard hints and moments of tension and stress, but because they all miss him so much, you really kind of focus on the loving kind of parts of him and how amazing and awesome he was. But you see in this episode, in such a tragic portrayal, how broken and damaged he is, how kind of raw and emotional he is. The moment with him and Carmy, where Carmy's like, we can do this, we can make our restaurant, and he leaves. And when you just see Mikey alone, he just breaks down immediately, clearly overwhelmed, clearly not prepared, and not really wanting to kind of do this with Carmy for whatever reason. If he's just scared, I think he's kind of very jealous of Carmy and how kind of successful he is. And he's kind of older brother, and like as an older brother, you kind of, I don't know, you have a certain sense about yourself in relation to younger siblings often. Even though that's not fair, if they're doing better than you, it can be really hard to take. And it's clearly taking a toll on him. At least maybe that's how I read it. The best thing about this show is you can read so many different things and kind of take and bring whatever you want onto these characters because it's so nuanced and complex. There's so much to take from his performance. But, you know, almost immediately after that, next time we see him, we don't see him do it. But the way that Richie looks at him and the way he's kind of acting, clearly he's taken something. So he's been overwhelmed and wanted to kind of reduce that overwhelming feeling in his heart with some kind of substance. I can't actually remember if they clarified exactly what it was, but, you know, presumably something kind of intense like meth or coke or something like that, I imagine, which is really, really heartbreaking, and then it leads to the huge kind of moment with the fork. We also get Bob Odenkirk, Better Call Saul himself, and he is always a delight, always amazing. For the first 45 minutes of this episode, I was kind of surprised they got Bob Odenkirk. Like, there were moments where there's these big tension, stressful moments in the kitchen, crazy stuff's going on, and he would just appear for like a line and then disappear. I'm like, how did they get him? He's barely in this episode. You kind of forget he's there at times. And then suddenly in that third act, his confrontation with Mikey. Oh my God. Like, you think you've seen everything you could get from Bob Odenkirk as an actor throughout Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. So nuanced and complex, so many rich emotions, so many different kind of things you've seen from him. And then you see him at Christmas dinner, Better Call Saul versus the Punisher, in just it's like a fist fight with words. The power his words are, the way that they hit Mikey like a brick wall just coming down on him. It's almost too much, and I like kind of hate him, and yet, yeah, I don't know, it's so complex and intense. I found it to be truly, truly devastating. You can see Mikey breaking down and knowing what happens in the future with Mikey and him taking his own life. It's sickening to see. And like, cause like there's a way where you could kind of understand where this guy is coming from, where he thinks Mikey is this, but there's a more positive way. There's a more kind of helpful way to say these things to him. You know, you can be truthful at times, but timing is key in front of all these people to bring him down, to mock him, to humiliate him in this way. It's sickening, and it's really heartbreaking because I actually can't even tell. He's called Uncle Lee, I think. Is he actually their uncle? Because Cousin Richie isn't actually their cousin. I don't know, I think that's quite an American thing. As someone from Australia, we don't really call people uncle and cousin if they're not. It's not really like a thing here. So I'm actually not sure if he is actually blood related. But that's the thing about family. It doesn't have to be blood. Very, very close. To the point where he's coming to Christmas, even though it appears some of them really don't want him to be there. So I think that really speaks to like, someone can say something that is so hurtful and mean, and if it's not true, it's not really going to affect you. But if you kind of somewhere in you think it is true, even if it isn't really true, but if you feel it is true, and someone who knows you to a strong capacity says that thing to you, it really can be devastating and powerful, and it can break you. And you can see it breaking Mikey in this episode. And the confrontation with the fork, the way it builds and builds and builds, and like the silence and the tension and the kind of anxious quietness of everybody else. Like some people chime in, but not really. Some people stay completely quiet. Carmy, our main character of the show, does not, I could be wrong, but he essentially says nothing or maybe one or two lines in the entire last 15 minutes. Like he is quiet. He is there, but he's not present. And it so cleverly highlights and kind of represents exactly how he was at that time in his life to his family. And that really kind of reinforces why he is the way he is, why he wanted to work at this sandwich shop after his brother died, and why he's striving to do the things he's doing, and why he is the way he is. It's, I don't know if you could really, I'm so shocked that they did so much character work by essentially having him not do anything in this episode. Like, and by the lack of presence and dialogue and just doing stuff, I understood so much about his character. It's, oh my god, the script is so well written. The show is kind of perfect. I'm kind of, like, even as I'm just talking about it now and going through it in my brain, I am becoming overwhelmed by how good this episode was. It's hard to pick a favorite part of this episode because it's all so good, but the highlight has probably got to be Jamie Lee Curtis as Carmy's mum. Jamie Lee Curtis is a really, really good actress. She's fantastic in a lot of things. I think, and this is with no hyperbole, this is easily the greatest performance she has ever given by a country mile. This is a shockingly good portrayal of an alcoholic who's clearly dealing with mental health problems and is just slowly mentally deteriorating throughout the episode in a way that is scary at times, heartbreaking at other times, and just stressful. The stress she feels in the kitchen is what the bear does best. Just building and building tension, building the stress of having to provide this impossibly large dinner. So many meals going on at once, so many different aspects of this meal, and just slowly building to a boiling point where she's going to erupt. The scenes in the kitchen with the mum are so intense. They are so good. And the way they build tension and stress with this little timer, that keeps going ding, and it keeps building and building, and then like you get like releases of stress when it dings and she just explodes with anxiety and horror, and it's just so intense and it's so clever. Just this timer just ticking away, and it's such a clever little kind of symbol of a ticking time bomb waiting for the episode to explode, waiting for the mum to explode. And the way that her family members just in the side, off camera, no, not off camera, so like just in another room where she can't hear, just being like, I have a feeling she's gonna explode tonight, just one of those nights. And the way they've just accepted that this is what's gonna happen, and no one really kind of, tries to help and change. But then if they do try to help her, she lashes out at them in a really angry, mean way. And like the way that she would be so violently, aggressively, no one help me. And then suddenly she's all alone, screaming and crying, being like, why won't anyone help me? Jamie Lee Curtis just completely kills it in every single moment of the scene. It is so believable. It is so powerful. It's kind of scary, but you kind of can't look away. It's one of those kind of horrible things where your eyes are just glued to the performance. And yet every time she's on screen, I want it to stop. I really wanted it to stop. And I wanted someone to help her. But then her daughter will come in and try and help her. But the way she's trying to help her, it's not the right thing. Like, she keeps saying, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Clearly the mom is not okay. But saying, are you okay, isn't the right move at this moment. And she's coming from a place with love. So you understand why she's doing the things she's doing and treating her the way she's treating her. But it's not working, and she keeps doing it and doing it and doing it. And the heartbreaking thing is no one else is really trying to help properly, emotionally support her. And yet the daughter is, and she's doing it wrong. And then she's the one that is the straw on the camel's back, whatever that, the straw that broke the camel's back. She's that last thing that ticks her mum over the edge by saying, are you okay? One too many times. Then she just explodes, loses her mind, and it's really upsetting. It got to that point in the episode and I'm like, this is perfect. I want this to stop. I want this episode to end. I can't handle this. This is like, emotionally, I was getting to the point where like, I am becoming overwhelmed to the point of just feeling really sick in my like stomach, like the bottom of my pit of my stomach, just feeling so uncomfortable and so distraught and scary. And for a moment when this was all building, I kind of forgot if the mum was alive in the present day. And I kind of thought, is something really horrible going to happen? To the point where when the episode ends and she crashes through with the car, I was like, if she's dead in that car, I will never emotionally recover from this episode. And luckily she didn't die, which means she can appear in the finale of the season. Which, is the most upsetting moment of TV. I was trying not to die inside. I was so sad. And there's that moment of hope when Natalie's husband Pete sees her outside, Jamie Lee Curtis having the cigarette outside. He comes out and you're like, oh, it's such a cool way to have Pete be the one that brings her in. That's going to be really nice. But there was something in my soul that just didn't feel right about the situation because it's the bear, and it's the finale, and Carmy's locked in the freezer, so something's gotta go wrong. And of course, like, I was shocked at first that the finale was going to be focused on the friends and family dinner, and not the first open night of, like, actual customers. But then, of course, I'm like, Jax, you're an idiot. This show is about cooking and family. Of course the finale is going to be about family, and we introduced the mum, we cast Jamie Lee Curtis, she gave a career-defining performance. Of course she's going to appear and break my soul into two. Oh my God, when she was like, I can't do this, I don't want to come in, I don't want to ruin this. And you're just thinking, how many Christmases did she think she's ruined? And she made the dinner, and she's like, and her insecurities and like, just all the things going on in her head about how no one wants her there, no one loves her, and this feeling of no worth, and the feeling that she does love her kids so very much. And she thinks the best thing is to not come into the restaurant because what if she ruins it? What if she ruins this beautiful, magical thing that they have created as a family? Oh my God, it's too much. It's too much. And then as Pete breaks down in front of Natalie later in the episode, just because he can't bear the fact that the mom made him say it was okay for her to leave. It just... And I think with a lesser performance, the mum might almost be too much. And no, the writing and the direction, it is very, 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 very good. So I don't think it would ever not be great. But to be so powerful and to simultaneously be kind of frightened and scared and be like, no one go in the kitchen. And then at the same time be like, someone get in that kitchen and help this woman. It is like... It's so real, like, the way that people just kind of treat her and, like, they'll be there and be like, at one point, Carmy essentially just kind of shrugs, and Natalie's, like, pouring vodka or wine or whatever just down the sink, just looking at, like, the second or third bottle that's gone, kind of in the, kind of assuming that the mum has just drunk all of that alone in the kitchen as she's making 1,400 different meals, and Carmy just goes, mum will be mum. It's all so real, it's all so powerful. This episode is the best. At the start, I think I said that this might be not the best episode ever. This might be the best episode of TV ever. It's too good. I think it's got to be the best Christmas episode. It's just crazy because Succession's final season probably had 3 of the best episodes of TV I've ever seen this season, this year. But I feel like the more I'm talking about this does so many different things. And like somehow like doesn't have half the cast. Half our main cast isn't there. We've only got 3 or 4 main characters in this episode. And we've got some characters who have either had 5 seconds of cameos or this is essentially their first episode, their one-off episode. And it does so much. It's just crazy. To have the best episode of your show be a 5-year flashback Christmas episode, it's crazy. In danger of going way too long with this review, I do have one last thing. Richie is probably my favorite character. I really liked him in season 1, but we were following Carmy so kind of strictly as a main character, at least I felt like, that I just loved him. I loved him so much. But Richie was always like that guy. He's like that wild card side character, and I love that type of character. Kind of like the anti-hero in a way where he's causing a lot of conflicts, but you understand where he's coming from and you love him. This episode, the way they show how different his life was 5 years ago is genius. And there is a way you could create this character at this time that I think would be cheap and easy. He's with his wife, the kid's about to come, but you could like have them, because you know they're going to break up and not be together in the present day. So you could make it that they hate each other. Things are clearly on the rocks. But no. They are still very much in love. And you can see these cracks in their relationship. These little moments, these little lies that he gets away with. These little moments where you can see how eventually those cracks will become holes in the relationship and grow and grow and grow. But at this moment, they are in love. And there's still Richie, classic Richie vibes, where he's talking to Carmy, and John Mulaney's there, and they're all talking about Claire. So you see that like Carmy has always had a crush on Claire, which makes the finale way more devastating and heartbreaking. But you see a classic Richie side, but you also see this very raw, emotional side of Richie that we never get, that we've never gotten. And the fact that after this episode, we immediately go from devastating heartbreak to the single most inspirational episode ever with Richie as he comes into his own, breaks out of his shell and becomes this totally different Richie and essentially steals the show from there on. And then in the finale, as Carmy locks himself in a cupboard and Carmy kind of loses this season, kind of ends on a loss, whereas Richie kind of comes out on top and is kind of a different man. And it's just so powerful because I feel like without this episode, just before that character arc and transformation, you'd be like, whoa, where did this character come from? He was always there. He was there before, but the loss of his wife and the loss of seeing his daughter all the time has kind of turned him back into this Richie that we've seen in season 1. And it's just so clever and perfectly structured, and I just love Richie so very much. Every single scene where Richie's just wearing the suit in the back half of the season, and he's just confidently saying, I wear suits now, and it's so confident and inspiring and awesome. Every time he told a character, I just wear suits now, and they're like, cool. I'm just like fist pumping to myself, being like, oh, I love him so very much. But he still has the kind of emotional kind of raw vulnerability to be able to tell someone who he's been very mean to for pretty much the whole show and antagonistic towards, he's so open and being like, I wear suits now because it makes me feel better about myself. This is the best show ever. I love this show so very much. It's so good. I can't handle how much I like this episode. And just the season in general. That's later in the season. But I think it all stems and comes into fruition from that episode 6, where we see the potential of what he can be. And then it's like, it's there. He loses it. And then in the last 4 episodes, he gets it back and becomes the best version of Richie we have seen. This is essentially a perfect season of TV. I do have to be honest, I think the first couple episodes took me a little time to get into it, but I just really loved the idea of this MasterChef chef coming back and trying to make a dingy little sandwich shop the best it can be because his brother died and it was his brother's shop. So we kind of lost that, and they're like, we got to build a restaurant. And I'm like, I'm not as interested in that to be honest. But then as the season progressed and we focused on character and we got all these separate character episodes, the Marcus episode in Copenhagen with Will Potter, oh, glorious. Truly wonderful. And then Richie's episode in episode 7, these standalone episodes that just focus on character and are essentially single one-off character episodes. And then the big flashback Christmas episode, double episode, it just does so much right. And then when you look at the season structurally and the way it all comes together with this big family first opening night, it's so good. I think the one thing I would say, in terms, not necessarily a negative, but I would say some of the side characters are not as utilized in the same way. And Sydney probably gets the least to do in terms of main characters, but I presume that that will change as the seasons progress and the show kind of changes and moves on. And I do think some of the Sydney stuff with Carmy was a little bit okay, that's going to be her arc. She's annoyed that Carmy has a girlfriend and is splitting his priorities. You should be happy for him, not annoyed. So I think that early in the season where she kind of gets her own episode was a little bit not bad, just everything else works so well. And her stuff with her dad and the reveal that her mum is dead without anybody saying her mum was dead, that was an amazing moment. But I do think she kind of gets shortchanged a little bit. In conclusion, I think this is a truly wonderful, perfect episode of TV. A true masterpiece of storytelling. It has highs, lows. It kind of does everything you want from an episode of TV. And I just think the way that finale has so much going on, it is spectacular. You have a dramatic, huge moment about a fork, and then you have John Mulaney saying grace and saying this whole huge speech about Christmas and the wonders and beauty of Christmas, and it is perfectly sandwiched in between the fork moment and Carmy's mum's breakdown emotionally, and then the fight between the two fork guys, Saul Goodman versus the Punisher, featuring a fork, and the way it's that's not, oh no! It is just a roller coaster of emotions in that third act. It's just so very good, and I think everything John Mulaney's character says in that beautiful speech about family and Christmas, where he's come from a family where he doesn't have a Christmas, he doesn't have a family to do this, and he loves this. He looks forward to this moment, and it's so cleverly able to show the beauty and wonder of Christmas, yet everything surrounding this speech about Christmas is truly heartbreaking and devastating. It's just such a beautiful combination of everything. It's a perfect episode of TV.